climb up this little Chilterns lane here marks the start of a quite epic adventure. This is a walk today. This is a walk today that I have literally been planning for 20 years and have never done in its entirety. Although never in any of my plans did I start it out here at Saunderton. So there you go, it just goes to show, doesn't it? I'll tell you more about it when we get on the way. You need to find a footpath up here, and then we've got about a 2-mile walk through woodland to the official start of the walk at an incredible location. I mean, a really incredible, famous, storied location loaded with history, with myth, folklore, and that's just the start of the walk. This is not a bad start to a walk, is it? Okay, so we'll get to the top of this hill and then I'll tell you what we're doing today. It's quite a steep climb, but the views at this stage of the walk are majestic, aren't they? Looking out over the Chiltern hills, isn't it gorgeous? So today we're finally going to walk the length of the River Wye. Yes, why? The River Wye is why I would say I'm so fascinated, you might say borderline obsessed, with walking rivers, because it's the river that runs through the village where I grew up. It runs through the valley where I grew up. It's kind of integral to my sense of place. And you might say in some ways, my identity, my sense of identity as being a person who grew up here in these hills, these Chiltern hills. It's also a story with a great river. It's not just a personal story. That's why I've put off doing it for so long, as I didn't want it to become a kind of mawkish, sentimental journey into my own personal past. There's so much about the story of this river, this beautiful chalk stream, very rare habitats, important habitats. And it's a beautiful chalk stream, and it tells a lot about the history and the story of England as well, not just of southern England. There's a lot to unpack. You can tell how passionate I am about it at the moment. I'm quite puffed out by this climb, and I've got a little bit of a way to go. We've got about a 2-mile walk through the woods to get to West Wycombe, where the stream rises near the Hellfire Caves. And you can see what the land here is made of. Chalk and flint, integral to the geology of this area, and creates the beautiful little stream that we're going to walk along today. What's actually good about extending the walk north of West Wycombe to walk through this wood here, through these chalk hills, is it sort of links us into one of the key themes of this walk and why this river became important, in that it was a link between the Thames at the end of our walk, where the Wye makes this confluence with the Thames down at Bourne End, and the ancient Icknield Way. And these chalk ridges, these chalk hills, are really important to the story of England, because along them developed these ancient trackways. The significant one here is it linked the Thames till the Icknield Way, and the Icknield Way then went northeast out through to Norfolk, to the North Sea coast, and in one vision it would have extended across the land bank, across Dogger Bank, across Dogger Land, into the Rhine Valley. So our earliest ancestors would have passed through these hills when the population of England was very much seasonal. People would follow the herds as they migrated and then follow them back. It's an incredible vision, particularly when later on we look at this little stream and we see there's a direct link between the modern settlement today and prehistory. I love it. Now we enter the landscape of myth here on West Wycombe Hill, with its hill forts and its hellfire caves and its dashing dashwoods. The source of our river is down there at the bottom of the valley somewhere. The source does vary from year to year, but we'll have to go via the wonderful Church of St Lawrence and the Dashwood Mausoleum. It's not a bad way to approach the source of a river at all. I've just seen this path here, which looks as though it takes us down to the road where the stream rises. So we will bypass the top of West Wycombe Hill, but don't worry, I'll fill you in on the story. So the top of the hill here, West Wycombe Hill, it said that there was an Iron Age enclosure there, a hill fort enclosure, some kind of settlement, and they reckon there might have been an earlier, at least Bronze Age settlement on the same site. They've also found Romano-British burials around the top of the hill here as well, all pointing, I think, southwest, which is consistent with sun worship. So the point is this hill here and the spring was a place of importance going right the way back into antiquity. And Sir Francis Dashwood is famously associated with the area because we have West Wycombe House, which, if we're lucky, we might get in. I doubt it. It's owned by the National Trust now, and it is open some days of the year. It's a massive 18th century mansion, and it was built by Sir Francis Dashwood's dad. I think it's John Dashwood. Sir Francis is famous for the Hellfire Club. I think there's like a Hollywood movie called The Hellfire Club, isn't there? I believe. And they were an offshoot of the Dilettanti Society, who were a group basically of young men who engaged in debauchery, but they'd gone on the grand tours and kind of collected lots of influences from the Near East and the Middle East and Southern Europe and stuff. Hence St Francis, the church there, is quite interesting because it's based upon the Temple of the Sun out Palmyra in Syria. By the way, I'll be dropping in footage, whatever footage I have, of the top there. And the other famous thing there is a golden ball at West Wycombe, the golden ball, which is still there, which I think it can accommodate up to 8 people. And that's where Francis Dashwood would entertain his guests, invariably young men from London, and they would engage in their debauchery with nuns that they invited from London. Yes, and I'm sure you can imagine what those nuns really were. My favourite story, though, of the antics of the Hellfire Club out here at West Wycombe is Sir Francis also created a system of caves in the hill here beneath my feet. Not quite beneath my feet, they sort of, you enter down the bottom of the hill there for his frivolity and his partying, but also they were based on the mythology of the ancient world, as it were. And there's an interesting system of rooms and chambers and passages. And once they were performing a mock ritual to raise the devil, to raise Satan, and they were playing a prank on one of their more impressionable friends, and at the key moment they released a monkey into the room that was all dressed up as Beelzebub, and it really scared some of their guests. And it's stuck in the mythology and the folklore of West Wycombe that there was devil worship in these hills. It's all good stuff, isn't it? And you know, the legacy of Dashwood and the what were they called, the Merry Knights of Medmenham, or whatever they called themselves. To this day, I mean, their slogan was "Do art they will, do as you wish," basically, which was adopted later on by Aleister Crowley. I think Dashwood got it from Rabelais, who'd got it from some vicar in Tunis. And that was later picked up by Aleister Crowley, who still has followers to this day. And apparently he used to come out here, as you can imagine, he would have done. I think people often misinterpret that thing. It just means follow your real desires. Don't be led by the crowd. Find out what your true passion is and follow that. It's not a bad credo to live by. So the River Wye rises somewhere in this low ground here, just off Chorley Road at West Wycombe. within these copse of trees, and apparently the source varies from year to year, which is apparently a common feature of chalk streams. I don't think it really sort of properly forms until it gets into the grounds of West Wycombe House, where it's channeled into a lake. So I think the stream is running just the other side of those sheep. You can see what looks like a riverbed there. Let's go out to the road there and see if we can see it crossing the road, our first sighting of the river. Yes, and here it is. Here's the sacred River Wye, the sacred little chalk stream. I think this is a part of it that's been channeled around this field here, because actually the house, West Wycombe House, is just over there on the other side of the gardens. I'm hoping that it's open today, but you never know. So here we are, we've gone round to the road, and this is the first trickling, the first emergence of the River Wye. It's from its source just up there, and here is where it crosses the road and goes into the grounds of West Wycombe Park. And I feel quietly optimistic that we might be able to get in there. Well, it's kind of predictable. I would have been surprised if it was open. The house and the grounds are closed, even though they're owned by the National Trust. I think the Dashwoods do still live in the house though, or part of the house anyway. You can see they're putting the bunting out for the King's coronation next weekend. And it's interesting because this is seen as being quite a patriotic place now, but of course this is where the English Civil War started, with the MP for Wycombe, John Hampden, refusing to pay the ship tax. A series of events that ends with the execution of Charles I. And I'll talk more about that later, because it does link with the glorious town of High Wycombe, the place of my birth. It's a shame that it is so traffic choked, you know, because this beautiful little village is every bit as old and quaint as it looks. It is a gorgeous little Georgian village, mostly Georgian. Some of the houses are Tudor, and it's owned by the National Trust now. And the Swan pub, the swan being the symbol of this area, the symbol of High Wycombe. There's the George and Dragon Inn. That's where the members of the Hellfire Club used to drink on occasion. I think it's 18th century coaching inn, complete with its own ghost, and you can stay there and experience the ghost. I think it has featured a number of those kind of ghost hunting programs. You can't beat a good parish council map. This is West Wycombe Parish here. We're in the High Street there, so you can see that the river runs through the grounds of West Wycombe House here and then out. So we'll have to try and get a view. I think the next view is we have to come off the Oxford Road and we can get a view there. So we're now walking along the A40, which of course runs all the way into the centre of London from here in the direction I'm facing, and if you go the other way, it runs all the way into Oxford. And Wycombe is roughly halfway between London and Oxford, which is one of the things that sort of contributed to its significance in the past. So I think we might be able to get a glimpse of the river down here, down Park Farm Road, which I wasn't anticipating. It's exciting. So this is Flora's Temple. It's one of the many temples built in the grounds of West Wycombe House. There is the Temple of Music in the middle of the lakes that are fed by the Wye. Isn't it delightful? And here's the river, running really fast, so close to the source. That is quite unusual in my experience. Rivers usually have a little bit of a trickle when they're nearer the source, and they get wider as they head towards their confluence. But here this glorious chalk stream is running fast and free. It's great. There's a bridleway here that follows this part of the stream, which is fantastic. It's quite unexpected. The Wye really becomes an industrial river as it hits High Wycombe, and we'll pick up that story as we go. The story of the industry driven by the river and the way that the river created the town. And it's interesting that the name, the River Wye, wasn't actually recorded until the 1800s apparently, and the cartographers made the mistake of thinking that the town was named after the river, but of course it wasn't. The town was already called Wycombe. I'll put up the etymology of High Wycombe on the screen. So they named the river after the Wye. I think there's a few examples of that. Isn't the River Peck an example of that, a back formation of Peckham? We do encounter that, don't we, as we walk these rivers. And it was also known as the Wick, the Wye. But here, it's still a bucolic, kind of rural chalk stream before it started driving the mills that created the industry that contributed to Wycombe's wealth. We'll cover that when we hit the actual town of High Wycombe, and as we actually work away all the way along to its confluence with the Thames at Bourne End. And this is another little branch of the Wye as it's been diverted through the grounds of West Wycombe House. We'll see that a couple of times on this walk actually, where the Wye was diverted to feed various mills. You can see how beautiful and clear the water is, which is said to be an attribute of the chalk streams. There is a wonderful book about the River Wye, about this little chalk stream by a lovely author called Charles Rangeley Wilson. Is it Rangeley Wilson or Rangley Wilson? I'm not entirely sure, but I first saw him on an episode of the Country File, BBC Country File, doing an item about looking for brown trout, would it be, close to London? Something like that anyway. And I was on a visit to Wycombe once. I went into the bookshop in the new Octagon Centre, and there was this book called Silt Road. I thought, I wonder if that's, and I recognised the author's name. He's not got any connection to the area that I'm aware of. I think he's just got an interest in chalk streams, and he wrote a whole book about the river. But the subtitle of the book is The Story of a Lost River. And of course, this is anything but lost. This river is culverted for only a very short section. It's a river that runs free of its culvert pretty much its entire course. And the book ends at Loudwater before it reaches the village where I grew up. It doesn't get to the confluence with the Thames. But I highly recommend that book. And it's kind of Seboldian in its style, I would say. I think he's been influenced by the writings of W.G. Sebold, The Rings of Saturn, I would say. So if you like Sebold, you'll probably enjoy that book. Also, if you like rivers and river walks. Look how beautiful, and look at the swans coming right at me. Whoa! I think the swan is possibly getting territorial. That was quite dramatic. Sorry, mister. I think that swan was telling me that this is their stretch of water here, and now they can safely glide away to the other side of this bend in the river. They're probably protecting the young ducklings there. What glorious beasts they are. They're such majestic animals, aren't they? No wonder they're the symbol of the town. This is one of the flint gatehouses to West Wycombe Park and West Wycombe House. Brick and flint houses are a real characteristic of the Chilterns. You see it a lot through the valleys here. So this factory here, Verco, Workplace Furniture, this is our first encounter with the other thing that Wycombe was most associated with, and that is chair manufacturing. Furniture manufacturing more broadly, but specifically chairs. The Windsor chair is from High Wycombe. It's not from Windsor. That was a sales thing. It was once known as Chairopolis. And of course, local football team, local heroes, Wycombe Wanderers, go by the nickname of the Chair Boys. Although I rather think it should be the Bodgers. Once upon a time, the hills around here were full of chair bodgers, men turning chair legs with pole lathes, an ancient technology that hadn't changed for hundreds if not thousands of years. And they would work in the woods here, in the beech woods, with the freshly fallen trees, stacking up their chair legs to dry before they were brought down into the town to be turned into chairs. A lot of women worked weaving the seat of the chair, and they had songs that they would sing as they did it. My nan did that at some point. Everyone did it. Furniture industry was really one of the main industries in the town. The other one we'll talk about further on. It's interesting, I'm discovering parts of Wycombe I've never been to before. I didn't know about this little park here where the river glides through the grassland. Isn't it delightful down there? As I mentioned before, chalk streams do create quite a unique habitat that really favours certain, I don't know what you would call them, but certain forms of life. I think there's a certain form of crayfish which flourishes in chalk streams, and there's certain plants as well. I believe trout are known to favour chalk streams. Chair making museum. I've never actually been there, and today isn't the day. I need to stick with my mission to follow the river as doggedly as possible. And here's the river once more as we move into the industrial fringe of Wycombe. Here we're in Desborough Avenue, a name that was used for the 100. The unit of administration here was the Desborough 100. So this is where our walk gets, it's one of the few parts of the walk where we can't really follow the river. It gets a bit zigzaggy. So we'll either do a bit of that, or we just basically carve through the centre of Wycombe once the river enters its culvert. That's the point we want to see. We want to see it enter its culvert. Then it goes underneath the brand new shopping centre, which inspired the project that I did here, 2004, 2005 with my sister Kathy. I go on about it quite a lot, Remapping High Wycombe. There are various videos that relate to that project on this channel. In fact, this YouTube channel started, I think, to host those videos maybe, or I put them up there later. But anyway, it's kind of linked. And I'll link to some other videos, particularly the video I did, the 100th episode of the walking vlog series, where I revisit a lot of that material. And I do walk a little bit of the river as well, actually. And now the river changes form slightly. Here it's running directly behind the backs of these industrial units, and it's here that it really would have driven a chain of mills that went all the way along the valley to its confluence with the Thames. There were a few out towards West Wycombe, but here is where they were most densely packed in. We'll encounter one of them on the other side of town, and we'll tell the story of the mills there. Luckily I can cut through this little road here. Another place, I don't think I walked around here, not even during my extensive remapping of High Wycombe in 2004, 2005. It's interesting, when I did the final walk for that Arts Council funded project, Remapping High Wycombe, I brought a couple of people down from London to do what I called the Nodules of Energy Significant Sites Walk. One of them was Nick Papadimitriou, first walk we ever did together, 2005. And it was really interesting to see that the impression that they got of Wycombe, which kind of corresponded with how I saw it. But it was interesting, you know, because it's unusual. It's in the Chilterns countryside, so it's stockbroker belt, as Nick would say, around it. But this is a working class town, an industrial town. It's still an industrial town. And yet you can turn off any of these streets here and you can head up into the Chilterns. You've seen that on the walk today, how we've gone from bucolic countryside in the beautiful picturesque village at West Wycombe to now we're in an industrial estate, and we'll be walking through the busy town any second. Those metal brackets hanging out over the river are curious, aren't they? I wonder what they once supported. Something on the side of this building. There's no access on the side of the building to whatever was there. Curious. So here we go. This beautiful old building here is the Wycombe Cane and Rush Works, which is where they would have done the rush and cane work for the chairs. Again, another place I've somehow never noticed before, adding to my map and knowledge base of Wycombe. Desborough Road. West Richardson Street. This sort of retains some of the old industrial character of Wycombe. On the other side of town we will encounter a medieval mill, and there were something like 32 or 30 odd mills along the River Wye between here and its confluence with the Thames, the majority of which produced paper. That was the other big industry in Wycombe, big product to come out of Wycombe, aside from chairs, furniture and chairs, and paper. Paper mills created various things with that paper, and one of the things was Harrison's stamp factory was up here. It's where the nation's stamps were created. That was in Wycombe. My Auntie Carol worked there. And it's also where the paper for banknotes was made as well, amongst many other things. Photographic paper, any type of paper really. And of course there's other products as well that you make with paper, and the byproducts of that industry as well. Dyeing, rags were turned into paper a lot of the time, all sorts. But the other big thing as we hit this part of Wycombe was light engineering. There was an awful lot of light engineering around Wycombe as well. And so you can still see some of the remnants of those kind of factories here. I'm looking for the river, by the way. It goes into its culvert soon. The red kites are flying really low here. They're as common as sparrows around the Chilterns, the red kites, after, you might say, a too successful rebreeding, reintroduction. And now they are everywhere. I remember when they were a real rarity when I was a kid, and now suddenly they're everywhere. They are amazing birds. So the Wye is making quite a dramatic exit from above ground to enter its culvert, but only a relatively short distance actually before it re-emerges on the other side of the town centre, because it's swallowed by the enormous Eden development, where I am going to take a little break. Suitably refreshed. Just a quick look at the High Street, because we're actually going to divert around the High Street. But there, that stone there, that odd stone, is believed to be of Neolithic origin by some, possibly part of a stone circle. There is another stone which curiously is attached to the one of the outer walls of the parish church there. It's been speculated they're remnants of an ancient stone circle. How about that? There's Robert Adams' Pepper Pot Market House. Me and Kathy, my sister, put our installation in there of our Remapping High Wycombe project. And up here is the majestic Guild Hall, again I think Georgian, which they desperately tried to knock down when they were reshaping the town in the 1960s. Thankfully it survived, and our route takes us around the side of the Guild Hall down here. And I'll link to a video below that has more of the kind of town centre history and all that stuff in it, because our focus is on the river. We can't get too sidetracked by the town centre. This has changed. That was the Angel, now it's O'Neill's. That was a significant pub in the history of Wycombe. Back in my youth, Wycombe was quite rough, Wycombe town centre. Now it's a university town, bizarrely. The river is running through its culvert under the ground here. You can see the back of the Legion Hall. It's called the Riverside. I don't know if that's meant to be, well, it's not ironic because the river's literally running outside the door. That's where I did my A-levels between the ages of 16 and 18, when it was Bucks College, and now it's Buckinghamshire New University College. I've even worked with people that went to uni there and did their degrees there, which always tickles me a little bit. So I think around the back of the Wycombe Swan Theatre is where the river re-emerges. I think I can see that little bridge here on the right. Here we go, just behind the fire station and just outside the stage door of the Wycombe Swan Theatre. Runs past the council offices here, which seems apt. Maybe the deity of the River Wye works for the council in those council offices. And it goes under the ground briefly and re-emerges on the other side by a medieval mill, which is where we shall re-encounter it. At the time of the Domesday Book, which is when is that? 1089, I'm going to say, 1086 or 1089. Probably neither of those dates. But at that point, there were already 3 mills in High Wycombe. When the first ones emerged, we don't know. But it was well established by that year, by the 11th century. And one of the mills here, Pan Mill, which we're going to see, is from around that era, that early medieval era. And those woods up there on Keep Hill have interesting stories to tell. Beneath that hill is a massive bunker, an underground nuclear bunker, which is where US Bomber Command for Western Europe was located. There was RAF Dawes Hill there, which is a major US Air Force base, and there may even be a few people watching this video who went to school there. American people were sent to the American high school there. There's also Neolithic camps up there, or various old ancient camps. I'll link below to a video where I go up through that wood and talk about its history. And here it is, Pan Mill, powered by our sacred River Wye. It's great that they've preserved this section of it. I'm not sure how old these buildings are, but the name is sadly not derived from the great god Pan, but from a Norman baron or a Norman landowner called Roger de Panel, and it was his mill. I think pan mill, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was used for the grinding of corn rather than for production of paper or anything else. Here we have a classic mill race where the water is made to run faster so it can power the mill wheel. And now the river is leading us out of the town centre towards its confluence with the Thames at Bourne End, which is, a reasonable distance away, and we've got about 3.5 hours of daylight. So this beautiful big open space here, the Rye, the town's playground, contains so much of its history. We've got the mill there, well, there's mills at either end, and over where the open air swimming pool is, sadly the river doesn't take us there, that was the site of a Roman villa. And it's said that when in Roman times that there were oyster beds in the river here, in the River Wye. They must have found remnants of that. There was also a holy well, on the Rye here that was worshipped and was a place of pilgrimage until it was suppressed by St Hugh of Lincoln, the Bishop of Lincoln. So lots of important resonances here, and just on the other side of the Rye we're going to see Bassettsbury Manor, and that played a big role. It played a role in one of the most important chapters of English history. And here we have another fast flowing section of the river where it would have fed another mill. Here now it's a car dealership. And here we have Bassettsbury Mill, which was attached to the medieval Bassettsbury Manor. And here's the river having passed through Bassettsbury Manor. Bassettsbury Manor was home to, I'll put the name on the screen, I think it was a guy called Roger de Basset at the time of King John. And King John is said to have stayed here at Bassettsbury Manor around the time that he signed Magna Carta, either before or after, certainly on his journey either to or from Runnymede. It is one of the most significant moments in English history, and because of the influence of Magna Carta on bills of rights elsewhere, its resonance travels far. Bassettsbury Manor played a small role in that. And the history of Wycombe feels like it's entwined with the history of the United States. It's actually where the Pilgrim Fathers, you know, the Mayflower and all that was actually planned here by Quakers living in High Wycombe who met in a small room near the town centre where we were stood there by the Guildhall. Around White Hart Street is where the Quakers met to plan their voyage to America. William Petty, when he was Prime Minister, he was Baron Wycombe. He lived at the Wycombe Abbey, now the Wycombe Abbey School, famous posh school where royalty sometimes go. He was the Prime Minister who urged peace with the rebellious American colonists. My American viewers, that's your rebellious heroes of the past. And he urged Parliament to pursue peace that led to the foundation of an independent United States of America. The end of the colonial rule in America was really pushed by William Petty, Baron Wycombe. These things always seem to lead back to one place, and for me they lead back to this little river, because without the river there is no town. And we're really close to the A40, the busy A40. We're just the other side of Wycombe town centre, and yet here we have this delightful little country lane here as we head out of the town. This is my favourite section of this walk. So just bumped into Nathan here, who's going to give me a can of beer to toast the walk with. Look at that. Thank you, Nathan.
Local brewery. So
is it?
Beer.
I drink this. They sell this in my local shop in Leytonstone actually as well. Where's it from?
The brewery's in Buckinghamshire.
Oh, amazing. So it's Chiltern's beer. So Nathan's been watching the videos since I did that Remapping High Wycombe project back 2005, 2006. Well, it would have been 2005 YouTube, but 2006, 2007. So an original viewer and a can of beer to drink. Well, I'm not sure if it will make it to the Confluence with the Thames. I'll try to. It might not make it much further than the end of Bowden Lane, but there you go. Cheers, Nathan. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Well, that was really, really lovely. And what was great is when Nathan came out, he was remembering the text that I wrote about the walk I did along here for the Remapping High Wycombe project. I did that walk in 2006. So that's how long he's been following the work, and it was great. It was great to remind me of the detail of the geese on that corner there. Now I love this bit here. This is so good. Go beneath this disused railway bridge here. This was the branch line that linked Wycombe to Bourne End. It basically followed the river. We'll see bits of that later, I think. And where you find rivers, you find sewage works, and there was a sewage works here. I guess there still must be part of it, but it's mostly become a shopping mall, shopping centre type place. I'm incredibly tempted to crack this open now, whilst it's cold, but I just feel it will slow me down a bit at the time when I need to pick up the pace. Great information board about the River Wye. It shows we are here. There you go, so that's where we started in West Wycombe. And we reached West Wycombe about, it's now just after 5 o'clock, we reached there about 4 hours ago, so it's taken us 4 hours to walk here. I did stop for half an hour in Costa Coffee, so 3.5 hours walking here. So we've got more of it to do, but we've got less than 3 hours till sunset, so I'll have to walk a bit quicker through here. This is where I grew up, there. I'd be doing a disservice to the deity of the River Wye if I didn't say something. River Wye's just there. If I didn't say something about the musical heritage of Wycombe, the Wycombe music scene, because the A40 is just there. It plays a big part in the story of Wycombe's musical heritage. It was a big centre for reggae. A lot of the Jamaican musical reggae artists used to like to play Wycombe because they could do it as a gig after landing at Heathrow to warm up before the big London gigs. A number of important reggae figures came out of Wycombe, going back to the 60s. A lot of bands came through Wycombe, obviously. Martin Knopfler of Dire Straits lived here. Obviously that's not the 60s, it's a bit later, in the 70s. He was a mechanic in Wycombe. I think this may have been where he started Dire Straits. My favourite bit of Wycombe folklore though, music folklore, is that the Nag's Head pub there, which was the main venue where so many famous bands played at the Nag's Head, including the Sex Pistols. And it was said that Ron Watts, who ran the Nag's Head, the music venue, was the original manager of the Sex Pistols, and he found them too much bother and bumped into a fella called Malcolm McLaren and said, "Do you want to take these fellas off my hands? They're doing my head in." And the other claim to fame that local kids said about Ron Watts is he was the manager of the Sex Pistols and he invented the Twix. The Mars factory is just up here in Slough, and he was in the marketing department, and they wanted an idea for a new chocolate bar, and he went, "What happens if we chop a Mars bar down the middle and put a biscuit through it?" And invented the Twix. Not sure if any of that is true, but there is a book either by him or about him called, what's it called, like 100 Watts of something. I'll try and find a link to it, but great bit of storytelling. Howard Jones, synth pop icon, Howard Jones, Wycombe, all sorts of people from Wycombe, including James Corden as well. The river's running just beside that Pizza Hut there. I've always loved the way that the river ran directly in front of this chapel here, the Baptist Church, Wycombe Marsh Baptist Church. I remember seeing it from the bus as we went home from town. You have to cross a little bridge to get into the church. It's delightful, isn't it? And I love this little path here, which takes us alongside the river into Kingsmead, or I should say onto Kingsmead. And this is our first shopping trolley of the day, which is great to see. Not that there's a shopping trolley, but there hasn't been any so far in the industrial part of the walk, so that's great. I don't know if this counts as an oxbow here, where the river kind of widens on a bend. And of course there's a pub there, the King George V. So I do believe we have a stink pipe here, which I don't think I've noticed before. It's a common feature of our Lost Rivers walks in London, not just Lost Rivers, above ground rivers. Remember the River Shuttle earlier in the year? Well. Now, there was a wonderful little footpath that ran beside the river just to the right, just over this little bridge, and then over there. I don't think it's passable anymore. I loved that footpath. I used to ride my bike along there. Now, I tried to do this a couple of years ago and it's way too overgrown. You end up having to turn back. But I'm paying homage to it anyway. And here is the re-emergence of the river from that footpath, but it gets a little bit gnarly up here actually. as it passes through some, well, what is now former industrial land, so I'm not entirely 100% sure of the route ahead. So we're now at Loudwater, which is a name actually you find on a few rivers. I've encountered on a few rivers around London. And here I think we may have to leave the river and pick it up as it goes underneath the majestic M40 flyover. There's no way through that housing estate. So I think here the river used to run around the outside of Loudwater Football Club. I'm sure my dad will correct me if that's wrong. Because I'm pretty sure I remember hearing stories of the ref being dumped in the river by the fans if they didn't like his performance. It's actually quite heartening to see this overgrown industrial site. There was a big factory there that was there throughout my childhood. My mum had worked in there. It's where they used to make circuit boards, and there was a really strong odour of Bakelite as you came along this stretch of the road. And now it's completely overgrown, slowly being reclaimed by nature. We're about to pass under the majestic M40 flyover. Huge structure carving its way across this river valley. This is actually where Charles Rangeley Wilson's, or Rangeley Wilson, this is where his book ends, curiously enough. But we've got plenty of river still to walk. This is where serious childhood memory starts to kick in. I remember we used to ride rubber inner tubes over that weir through this section of the river until we got caught and told off and chased away. The river now winds itself through this really quite fascinating industrial landscape here. And I hope we can... So navigating the next section of the walk is the thing I'm looking forward to most today, actually. Some very potent memories, some sort of landscapes that capture your imagination. I don't know what's going on down here, but look, you see, there's a kid's bike in a shopping trolley and a chair facing the river. And also, I don't know how they got it down there, right next to this fast-flowing bit of the river here. It's rather stating the obvious to say there was a mill here. There was mills all around this corner and then through Woburn Green. It was quite thick with mills along this section of the river. My grandfather worked in one of the mills. Well, the mill that's gone, but we'll pass the site later on. It was a massive part of their life, the mills, the talk of the mills in the local pubs here. It's what they talked about, how the machines were going in the pubs. My dad talks about that when he'd go to the pub with his dad. That's what the men would sit there talking about, how machine number one was doing. My great uncle Pete was dragged into a threshing machine in a mill, a paper mill, and went through it and was basically flayed from the waist up and was incredibly lucky to survive. They didn't think he would survive. They managed to stop the machine. They pulled him out, wrapped him in a sheet and sent him home to his mum to die. And the doctor came to look at him, didn't fancy his chances, but Uncle Pete survived. I always noticed though his neck was like purple. It was purple from there down. I guess that was the scar. It's now 6:45 p.m. on a bank holiday Sunday. Massive empty car park here. That home base was Texas Home Care and I used to work. And I used to walk along a back path near the river to get to work, and I'm hoping that path still exists. Fantastic, it's still here. And look, we're right beneath the M40. And here's this footpath. Fortunately, we can't see the river. It's to the right there on the other side of that fence, but I can feel it, I can smell it. And just the other side of this wall here is the massive garden of a big house. I remember my dad saying when he was a child they used to open up the gardens in the summer one day and have all the local kids in there and serve up lemonade and cakes and stuff. This has got a great name. This is Falcon's Croft. Isn't it fantastic? This really is the landscape of my childhood where I used to play. So much nostalgia. Actually, I was about to do a piece. This is a footpath which takes us back down to the river. Wow. Suddenly I feel like I'm 7 or 8 years old again, running up and down here with my mates. The house back there, curiously, is called Clapton Revel, and I think it's because it was associated with Clapton Mill. And of course, as you all know, Clapton's a place in East London, very close to where I live. I'm not sure what the link is. Might be something to investigate. So there's Mill Cottage just there, and behind it you can see the mill. It used to terrify us. Should we go up there and have a look, see if I still get scared? Here's the river here. My mate, Colin, I think his name was, when I was like 5, he lived in that house there to the left. And we used to play in his garden and get into the river. Spent a lot of time in the river down here. I really want to avoid lapsing into mawkish sentimentality. It may be very difficult here. I'm a man in his early 50s walking around the streets where I grew up. My Auntie Carol lived behind me over there. She used to babysit me with my nan. Just behind me over there. We'll just go up here, up Millstream Way, to look at the mill. It's really funny being back here. I feel like I'm little again, 7, 8 years old. I want to get up to mischief. I want to do something naughty. So here it is, Clapton Mill. When I was a kid, you used to be able to get right up to it. I don't know what they've done. And we used to peer through the windows. There were lots of kind of like kilner jars, and it was mysterious. We were scared. We thought there was a mad scientist living there, as they would in an old mill. So that's the field where we played when I was a kid. All the time, all day long. And my back garden was just the other side of that field. I bring this up because I'll give you a couple of seconds to guess the name of the street where I grew up. Wow, massive heron there. Look at that guy just stood there in the water, stock still. Isn't that amazing? I don't ever remember seeing herons here when I was a kid. And that's the Wycombe pub over there. Really good pub, that. Fine pub, it always was. Ominously, it doesn't look very open. But I haven't been in there for a few years. There was a beer festival in there last time I came past. Sadly, I haven't got time to stop for a pint because it's 7 o'clock. Sunset's at 8:20. We've still got a little bit to walk. So I think I will go up here, up Old Moor Lane, and not along Watery Lane. And then we can reconnect with the river. We can't see it for a little bit. We're now in Woburn Green. Well, technically this is Woburn Moor, I think, but all part of the village of Woburn. And this alleyway here should reconnect us with the river eventually. And of course, the road I grew up in, the street I grew up in, was called Wye Road, which is probably why I am so obsessed with walking rivers and streams. Maybe it's just a coincidence. I've not really explored this development here before. It's built on the site of the old Glory Mill, one of the great mills of the River Wye. In its last incarnation, it produced photographic paper, and then I think that operation was moved to Germany. But this was a significant feature in the area, this mill, and now it's new apartments. They look all right. That's the main building there, I think. We can't really access the river very closely as it flows through the village of Woburn, so we'll follow the route of it as closely as we can. I don't think we can see the river at this point. We'll see it cross the road and then we'll have to pick it up near Woburn Manor Park. Another alleyway here. It takes us near Hawkesbury Avenue, and it's nice to see some things haven't changed, although the village has changed a lot. There's a police operation in progress, which is exactly where that would have happened when I was a kid. It's mad actually, because this is another section of the river I've never really seen before, because I wouldn't have come up here. This was not on my patch. Kids, remember, highly territorial. we'll get a good drink in, visually of course, of our lovely river here, because there's a section where we can't follow it, but we will pick it up in about, for me, 10 minutes. For you, it could be the next shot, not quite, but a couple of shots later. Basically, it flows through some fields over there, and the footpath goes up and around it. It doesn't actually go anywhere near the river, so we'll detour via Woburn Green and pick it up in the park. So this detour does give us the opportunity to go across Woburn Green. This warms my heart. This is a place I visit in my mind quite often. I've only just noticed that my mic, the power on my wireless mic, cut out. I don't know when, so I don't know how much audio I lost. I'm probably going to insert this back at the point where I lost the audio, and I'll have to do some voiceover. And maybe what I'll do in voiceover will be better than what I came out with. And let's hope it wasn't that much. I'm plugging the mic directly into the camera now. So, in a way, it's probably just as well that the audio cut out at this point, because this is the part of the walk that would have been an awful lot of waffle, I imagine. This housing estate here was built on the site, on the grounds of the medieval Woburn Manor House, which at one point belonged to the Bishops of Lincoln somehow. And the river leads us into Woburn Park, the home of the glorious Woburn Narcovians Cricket Club, which is where I grew up, basically. My dad played here for 35 years or so. I played here as a young colt. And Narcovians is an unusual name for a cricket club, and it's said to have its origins in a charity organisation that was founded by a group of actors and musical artists and various people in the entertainment industry who formed an organisation to raise money for the poor and the destitute of London. Among them was the brilliant Will Hay, and also Douglas Fairbanks Jr. was a member of the Narcovers. A lot of the people who started the cricket club at Woburn had also been members of this group, and so they took the name. It's a lovely story, isn't it? And this is where I spent all my childhood summers, here at this cricket ground. One particular potent memory from when I was very young in the 1970s is we played against Pink Floyd, of all people, who have a cricket team. And here is the late 12th century Woburn Church, wonderful Norman church where I was christened. Well, I don't think I've been in here since I came here for a wedding when I was about 4 years old. Here we have another of the great mills of Woburn, Soho Mills, going along with Clapton as well, lots of London references. One of my favourite little Woburn bits of trivia is up here is a place called, called Woburn Grange, which was a dodgy nightclub in the 80s, but it had been used as the exterior locations in Fawlty Towers. This is Basil Fawlty's hotel in Fawlty Towers, which is a really wonderful image, isn't it? It's actually nowhere near Torquay, it's in Woburn Green. And as we turn around Cawes End Corner into Bourne End, this is where Enid Blyton lived when she was, I'm not sure which part of her career she lived in Bourne End, but my dad has memories of Enid Blyton being in the area anyway. And this industrial estate here, I think this is more or less the area occupied by Jackson's Mill, or various mills that were known by different names throughout time. They produced millboard in one of those mills. It's actually where my grandfather worked as a shift foreman. And I went down this road here with the dying light, hoping that it would lead me, keep me close to the river and then take me through out, sort of cutting off a big bend in the street. That wasn't to be the case. I gambled and I lost. Anyway, what I just said that wasn't recorded definitely was that I've drunk all my water, I'm completely parched, but I'm not going to drink the can of what is now warm pale ale that Nathan very kindly gave me back there on the edge of Wycombe. I'll have that another night. So in case it was lost. I now have to double back on myself and go around in a big loop through Bourne End to get to the Confluence, or near the Confluence as I can get. It's quite frustrating. We can hear the river, but we can't see it on camera. But it's there, and I can certainly smell it. And there's our little river, just before it makes its confluence with the Thames, and unfortunately we can't get down there. I've seen the road where we might have got a glimpse is gated off in a little industrial area. What a magical walk it's been. Well, I don't mind admitting that I'm absolutely filleted. This has been a majestic walk, an absolutely majestic walk. It's a lot longer than I thought it would be because I started further out at Saunderton, which I don't regret any of it. If transport had worked for me, I would have got here in daylight, but there you go. It's been an incredible walk. It's been about 17 or 18 miles. And I'm in the middle of nowhere right now. I've got to try and find my way back to somewhere where I can sit down and call a cab. So I might not get back to London until about midnight. Thank you so much for joining me on that glorious walk that of course becomes a little bit of a personal pilgrimage. But it's, for me, in a way, is the ultimate, or the foundational river walk for me. So, wow, I'm so glad I've finally done it. I'm so glad you came along with me. So, as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be. And let's just hope I don't have to walk all the way to Beaconsfield to get the last train back to London.